What's up, everyone? So there's this massive bill that just passed the House that everyone's talking about, and honestly, most of the coverage makes my head spin with all the political back and forth. I wanted to sit down and actually explain what this thing does and how it might affect your life because, spoiler alert, it probably will. We're talking about a bill that's going to add $2.4 trillion to the country's debt. I know, these numbers are so big they don't even feel real anymore. But stick with me because this stuff actually matters for your day-to-day life. Alright, so what are we dealing with here? Trump's calling it his big beautiful bill, and yeah, it's definitely big. Here's what it does. The tax stuff. Remember those tax cuts from 2017? They were supposed to expire, which would mean your taxes go up. This bill keeps them going. Plus, it bumps up the child tax credit to $2,500 for a couple years and raises the amount you can inherit without paying taxes to $15 million. All told, we're looking at about $3.8 trillion in tax cuts over the next decade. The cuts. But here's the thing. To help pay for some of this, they're cutting nearly $1 trillion from programs like Medicaid and food stamps. Now, the folks whose job it is to crunch these numbers, they're called the Congressional Budget Office, and they're pretty much the only people in Washington who don't pick sides. They say even with all these cuts, we're still going to add $2.4 trillion to the debt pile. Let's talk about healthcare because this is where things get pretty serious for a lot of people. Medicaid gets hit hard. They want to cut over $600 billion from Medicaid over the next 10 years. To put that in perspective, that could mean somewhere between 8 and 10 million people lose their health coverage. That's like every single person in New York City plus a few million more. Who's this going to hurt? Mostly families who don't make a lot of money, people in nursing homes, and folks with disabilities. They're also adding work requirements, so if you're an adult without kids, you'd have to work to keep your coverage, even if you're up to 64 years old. Here's what that actually means. If you're someone who uses Medicaid, or if someone in your family does, this could be a really big deal. Maybe your mom's in a nursing home, or your kid has special needs, or you just don't make enough at your job to afford regular insurance. This could directly affect whether you can get health care. And even if you don't use Medicaid yourself, think about it this way. When people can't afford to go to the doctor, they end up in the emergency room. And guess who ends up paying for that? All of us, through higher insurance costs and higher hospital bills. Okay, so how does this hit your wallet? The debt thing, look, our country already owes $36 trillion. I can't even wrap my head around that number. Adding another $2.4 trillion is like, imagine you already have a massive credit card bill, and then you add another huge chunk to it. Your interest rates. When the government borrows more money, it can push up interest rates for everybody else. That could mean you pay more for your mortgage, your car loan, your credit cards, basically any time you need to borrow money. The tax break side. Now, if you're middle class or doing pretty well financially, you'll probably pay less in taxes. That's real money back in your pocket. Families with kids will get a bit more from the child tax credit too. The reality check. But here's the thing nobody wants to talk about. You might pay less in taxes now, but the government's going to borrow more to make up for it. And eventually somebody's got to pay that back. Either through higher taxes later, or fewer government services, or, well, we kick the can down the road and let our kids deal with it. This thing barely passed the House, like, by one vote. Now it goes to the Senate, and honestly, who knows what happens there? They might change it, they might kill it completely. Even if it passes, this stuff doesn't happen overnight. Tax changes usually get phased in, and those Medicaid cuts would happen over several years. This thing barely passed the House, like, by one vote. Now it goes to the Senate, and honestly, who knows what happens there? They might change it, they might kill it completely. Even if it passes, this stuff doesn't happen overnight. Tax changes usually get phased in, and those Medicaid cuts would happen over several years. Alright, let me just be straight with you about what this could mean. If you're doing okay financially, you'll probably see some tax savings, which is nice. But you're also living in a country that's borrowing a lot more money, and that could cause problems down the road. If money's tight for you, this could be rough, less help with healthcare, maybe less help with food, and any tax breaks you get might not make up for losing those other benefits. If you're young, sorry, but you're probably going to inherit this debt problem. That's not fair, but it's the reality. For everybody, we're basically choosing to pay less now and owe more later. Whether that's a good trade depends on your situation and what you think is important. Look, I'm not going to tell you this bill is amazing or terrible. That's not my job. My job is to help you understand what's actually happening so you can make up your own mind. But I will say this, These aren't just numbers on some government spreadsheet. This is real stuff that affects real people. The family who depends on Medicaid for their kids' medical care. The couple trying to buy a house who might face higher interest rates. The young person wondering how we're going to deal with all this debt. What do you think? Is saving money on taxes now worth borrowing more as a country? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and keep it civil, people. We can disagree without being jerks about it. If this helped you understand what's going on, hit that subscribe button. I'll keep breaking down this stuff as it happens. Catch you next time.